At the UN Climate Change Summit in Copenhagen, international negotiators are said to be trying to complete a deal by the time President Obama and more than 100 other heads of state arrive Friday. The agreement in the works is apparently non-binding, and that's not good enough, say developing country leaders and climate justice activists who've been turning up the heat by holding some of the largest demonstrations ever in support of climate justice. In the U.S. media, the direct action's been getting some headlines, but the message is also pretty direct. From one Nobel laureate to another, Archbishop Desmond Tutu addressed the crowd.
We want people to know that we belong in one family. We are sisters and brothers, members of one family, the human family, God's family. And they try to separate us like apartheid did. We say no. We put down all of the walls that want to separate us. We put down all the things that separate us. And we say we belong together. The world is waiting for a real agreement. Don't give us a political agreement. We want a legally binding agreement.
Well, to bring us up to speed about how that world family is doing on coming up with a real binding agreement, we're joined by Jacqui Patterson, director of the NAACP's Climate Gap Initiative. She's joining us from Copenhagen. Welcome to the program, Jacqui. Glad to have you.
Great.
First question may be stupid, but I'll ask it anyway. What is a nice, civil rights and U.S. racial justice group like the NAACP doing in Copenhagen at a climate summit?
Yes, good question. Yes, well, unfortunately, climate change and climate justice is one of the most important civil rights issues and human rights issues of our time, because communities of color are currently disproportionately impacted by climate change and stand to be even more so down the line.
What have you made so far of that concept of family? Is the world really one human family, as Archbishop Tutu would like us to remember? Or are we seeing really both at home and across the planet real divisions? Are we being able to bring that family together now in Copenhagen?
I would say a little bit of both in a way. I mean, there's been amazing kind of pulling together of the civil society communities as well as along with the some of the government delegations, particularly from the global south. So in that way, we're all seeing our interconnectedness and trying to speak with one voice on what we need in order to preserve this earth that we all share together. On the other hand, people have different views, I think, in terms of what targets we need to be hitting around making that happen, and the extent of the severity of the crisis that's facing us around climate change.
And yet, while a lot of the kind of corporate backing has gone to language like Copenhagen and all of that, and a lot of people have been talking about we're all in this together, no offense to Bishop Tutu, but the developing world nations, as I understand it, started this week by simply pulling out of the talks, pulling the plug, walking away, saying, if you can't get it, that we really have our lives at stake, we're just not going to participate. A bad agreement is worse than no agreement, it seems they were saying. Were they heard?
I believe they definitely were heard, and certainly there were efforts being made to pull them back in, to be conciliatory, to make it clear that they were being heard. The extent to which that's real and the extent to which they believe that, I think, is still very much in question. But I think that by walking out there, really making, as you said, making a statement to say there's no use in wasting our time here if you're really not thinking seriously about the impacts of this on our lives, on our countries, on our families and communities. So we'll see. I mean, hopefully that those types of actions are a wake-up call to folks that this is no small game that we're playing, that it's really life and death.
Have you ever felt in your work there with the NAACP Climate Gap Initiative a similar temptation just to say, oh, screw it, I'm walking out, my brothers and sisters so-called just don't seem to get it, what people of color are facing here and around the globe?
Not so far. Of course, I'm kind of new in this position, so I haven't quite had the point where I've had to be frustrated to that extent. But so I'm still hopeful that people just don't know, and that it's just a matter of making them know, making them understand the import, and that we'll be able to move the ball. That might be naive, but I'm trying to keep the hope.
Do you think there are lessons out of the civil rights movement that apply right here?
Definitely. I think sticking to the conversation, just sticking in there and continuing with good messaging and pulling people together around central messaging are lessons that we can use. Just the simple kind of ways that people organize in terms of understanding the self-interest of the individuals and communities involved are lessons that can be learned. Just staying consistent and keeping the fight going, never losing hope.
You were a big supporter of President Obama. How do you think he's doing, and what do you make of his role so far there in Copenhagen?
Well, it remains to be seen when he comes, but but as supporters of Obama, I think what we need to do is to continue to support so that he can kind of make the strident agreements that we need in order to really get on top of this climate change issue. And I think without the support of the communities around the country, then he's not going to be able to just kind of step out on his own and do that. He really needs us to stand behind him and encourage him and support him in developing strong targets.
So what will be your agenda when you come back? Because there will be life after Copenhagen.
That's for sure. My agenda when I come back is to actually to start to, or to continue to build that base of understanding amongst our constituency as an NAACP, so that every NAACP unit and chapter out there actually is well familiar with this issue and has a common voice around how to push on it. And then also to work with the administration so that they too understand what's at stake in terms of our communities, and to keep helping to support them in terms of pushing for strong targets.
Well, thanks for joining us there from Copenhagen, Jacqui Patterson of the NAACP's Global Climate Initiative. Thanks for being with us.